Welcome to Missions Life, where we share resources and encouragement for current missionaries, future missionaries, and those praying for missionaries. Missions can be hard, and we want to help you face the challenges of life, leadership, and ministry. We want your life to bear fruit for the gospel wherever you are. I'm Kyle Ferran, here with my co-host and wife, Heather. Hi, everyone. Today is a little bit of a different episode. Instead of us interviewing someone, someone else was interviewing me. This was actually originally aired on the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast as he interviewed me about godly grit. And it was just a great conversation. Richard had a lot of good insights that he brought into the conversation. So I wanted to share this with you as well. If you'd like to check out some more of Richard's podcasts, put the link in the show notes for you to be able to find that if you'd like to follow up on some more of his podcasts as well. It's a really good resource. But I hope that the conversation is beneficial and an encouragement to your soul.
This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
This week is my privilege to be interviewing Kyle Ferran, who is a missionary administrator based in Portugal. He's a regional director for ABWE Mission Agency. Previously, he served in South Africa as well as in Tanzania and has 3 children. He's written other books that we've interviewed before, but today we'll be interviewing him on his latest book called Godly Grit, Unshakable Resilience, and a Grit for Life and Leadership. Well, once again, it's my pleasure to have a guest with me who's written a book recently, and Kyle Ferran has written other books. We've had him on our podcast before, talking about a different book, but this one is hot off the press, called Godly Grit, Unshakable Resilience, and Grit for Life and Leadership. And I really enjoyed this book, Kyle, just as I did the last one, and so glad to have you back on the show with us. And Kyle, maybe just for those who either forget or didn't hear the earlier podcast, tell us about yourself. What is it that you do?
So my wife and I are missionaries. We serve in Western Europe. We live in Portugal, and I'm the regional director for ABWE for Western Europe there in Portugal. We've been in missions for a bit over 20 years and started off South Africa for a number of years, then Tanzania, and now the Lord's moved us up to Western Europe to live in Portugal.
Yeah.
So
how many missionary units, I guess that maybe they call them, around Europe that you're giving direction to?
So we have about 90 missionaries in 8 different countries that we work with. And it's a real joy to be able to just serve them through coaching and coming alongside to encourage them, and working a lot with team leaders and developing them and seeing them grow in the ways God has gifted them.
Wow. And then, as if that was not leadership challenge enough, you're also the father of 3 daughters. And so,
yeah, I have 3 wonderful daughters.
Good for you. Well, you this book on godly grit, I read Angela Duckworth's book on grit when it came out, and I saw this book, and I was kind of curious. Sometimes there's books that kind of come out with just sort of a Christian version of a secular predecessor. But as I got into this book, clearly it's has all kinds of great material that you've added in from a Christian perspective. Duckworth's book is great, but more of a secular approach, and yours is clearly written toward Christian leaders. And I did you did make a distinction I thought was interesting. She talks a bit about passion, that drives you when things are tough, and but you kind of lean toward purpose. I'm kind of, and I like what you said about purpose. What's the difference if things are tough and maybe it's you're leaning into what you're passionate about, even though things are really hard. How is that different than what you kind of recommend, and that's leaning in toward your purpose?
I think there's there's a lot of benefit, I think, from understanding passion, and it's not to discount that anyway. But I think in our culture, sometimes there's this idea that, well, people define passion as, well, I feel so passionate about it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's more of like this feeling component of, well, if I'm not passionate about it, I shouldn't be doing it. And
Mm.
I just try to use the word purpose, because there's a lot of things that God calls us to do that we may not be passionate about doing. There's different parts to our role or the task that God's called us to that are going to be hard. They're going to be difficult. And we may not be really passionate about those things. But is it fulfilling our purpose? Is it
Yeah.
moving us towards what God's called us to do, and really finding our drive in that purpose? And we will be passionate about some parts of it, but I've just seen a lot, especially younger people, that have fallen prey to not being as engaged as they should be because they weren't passionate about it. And it became an excuse to not really do what God had called them to do. And so just leaning into that idea of purpose so that we will be faithful to follow after what God's called us to do, and finding deep fulfillment in our purpose of what God has called us to do, even if it is hard, even if there are parts of it that we don't enjoy. I
Yeah.
don't enjoy confrontation, but that's part of leadership. So
Yeah.
we have to be
Yeah.
able to do that, and just accept that that is part of the role God's given to us, and find that fulfillment in it. And as we do that, it can really bring a lot of satisfaction. It rephrases everything. There's a story I share in the book about just purpose. And when we were in South Africa, we would always go camping every year for family holidays, and every year, few days, it rained.
Yeah.
And when you're camping, the thing you're trying to avoid is rain. Rain is the enemy. Cold is the enemy. And I wanted to hike up to the top of Tugela Falls, the second highest waterfall in the world. And it was up on the top of this ridge. And the stipulation was anyone that came from the family, there was no complaining, and we weren't turning back unless there was a blizzard. And so my oldest daughter and I, we went on this hike, Abby, and the first half of the day, it rained the whole day, or it rained for the first part of the day. We were climbing up 40-yard chain ladders up this face of cliffs in the rain. But what was different was, unlike at the campsite where rain was the enemy, it wasn't a problem anymore, because my purpose was different. I had a
Yeah.
purpose, and my purpose wasn't to stay warm and dry. My purpose was to get to the top. My purpose was to get to the summit and the waterfall. And the same thing happens in our life when we really focus on our purpose versus maybe our passion. We can push through great things because it redefines all those challenges to be put into perspective in
Yeah.
relationship to how is this actually helping us get to our purpose. And
Well,
we may still be going through rain, but it has a purpose now.
I liked with that. It's a great story. I thought and I love the kind of conclusion. You said campers want comfort, climbers want the summit. I thought that's a great way to kind of summarize that. And, it varies over the years, but there are times where the average tenure of a pastor was under 2 years,
Wow.
where they'd be at a church for 2 years or less. Sometimes at one point, I think it got down to almost a year and a half. And you
Hmm.
just think the honeymoon period, that there's lots of passion in coming to a new place where everybody's excited for you to be there. But within a year or two, facing all the problems of church, your passion can wane, and you might start to think it's just time to move on. And sometimes you just have to lean into that purpose to say, God prepared me, wired me, gifted me for this kind of assignment, whether it feels comfortable or not. That's what God's called me to do. So don't keep looking around for an easier assignment. Just lean into what God's given you. So I like that. I probably kind of jumped ahead there for a moment there. Tell us, what is your definition of grit? What is you have the phrase godly grit,
Hmm.
which I think kind of obviously sort of alerts us. This is a Christian biblical sort of perspective on grit.
Yeah.
I think Duckworth kind of did some studies, and schools and different things, and kind of came at it from that perspective. But what do you mean by grit, and why is grit so important?
Kind of the key part to the definition there was just that long-term combination of strength, courage, resilience, and grit to endure in the challenges. The book really touches on those four parts: the strength, courage, resilience, and grit. A little bit of discipline in there too, and there was like a tiny little illustration in there to highlight that. Would be if you're climbing a mountain, discipline is what gets you up every day. It makes you exercise to be able to get ready. Courage is what helps you overcome that fear of falling. Strength is what helps you just to press on. Resilience helps you get back up when you get knocked down. And grit keeps you going until you get to the summit. And godly grit really just tries to pull all those things together to say, how does that work in the Christian life in a way that we're able to press on using the strength that God gives? And I think really that's one of the key differences there with I've read a ton, and you probably have too, tons of books on grit and mental toughness, things like that. But in the worldly perspective, it all rests on your own inner strength, and it turns inward to find that strength. Whereas this one really turns outward. And that godly grit is like, where's the source of our strength? Our source is in God. So it looks for all of those things, it looks to God to find those.
Well, and I've been in ministry and in leadership long enough that I could give you a long list of people that used to be in the fray along with me that have long since burned out, quit, moved on, fallen, or whatever. The casualty rate sometimes is pretty alarming. And you look at that and just say, when I was in school, when I was being trained to be a minister, I don't think that I ever had anyone talk about grit to me. It was just sort of assumed that if God's called you, you're going to stay in. And then you start watching. I mean, I had friends who didn't even finish seminary and they were already out. And it was like, wow,
that's too bad.
I mean, the casualty rate, what's going on here? And so, I think, and perhaps, I don't know what you're seeing today, but it just seems like grit is more than ever. That's a issue for leaders to be not taking for granted, because it seems like grit is called for now as much as it ever has been. Is that what you're finding?
Absolutely. I think it's becoming a greater need more and more, just to raise the awareness of that, especially for some younger generations that not from fault of their own, but have been protected a lot more. And I think that's one of the things that's really key in this, is just remembering that, we can learn about grit. We can learn about these things and resilience, but you actually have to grow through experience. The same thing is, it's like going to the gym. Like, you can read piles of books about exercise. That doesn't make you any stronger. You actually have to go and lift the weights or do the bodyweight exercises. You have to do something. And the same thing is true with grit. This book is really helpful. It gives you some principles and practices, some mindsets, which are helpful as you go into it. But at the same time, it's a journey. It's actually having to go to God's gym of God's challenges and be able to go through those difficulties with God. And that's what's really going to be building that into your soul, and move these things from just mental cognition and understanding down to, my soul trusts in God in the midst of trials, and my soul is at peace even when I get bad news. And that is really the key part to that. And today's younger people especially haven't had as many opportunities just in normal day-to-day life, because they have been protected more. But even as, those that have been in ministry for a long time, we need reminders of this. I've needed reminders of this. We're going to face challenges, and every challenge we face, it seems like you can probably attest to this too. It's like every step God calls us to is a step up, and it's a bigger step, and it's the same but deeper. And we
Mm.
need that reminder to stay faithful up until God calls us home.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of, I think perhaps younger leaders of every age. It's probably not just millennials or Gen Zs today, whatever, but probably every young generation has always had a certain idealism about if you're serving God, everything will just work out, and you just love God with all your heart, and people will love you in return, and then you get sideswiped and betrayed and lied about
Mm.
and gossiped about, and you're just not prepared for that, and you didn't expect that,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, it's interesting. You page 25, you said strength, courage, resilience, and grit are uncommon traits in a world gone soft, and I think I think some people kind of feel like, well, you don't need to be tough if you're serving God. I mean, it's going to be all God anyway. You just kind of sit there and let God do what He's going to do. But you quote Augustine there in that regard to say, well, God, it is in God's strength, but there are things you have to do. God
Yeah.
doesn't just. I'm always having someone trying to correct me to tell. Every time I encourage people to study, to work hard, do anything, I always have someone that wants to correct me and say, "Oh no, it's all God." I'd say, "Well, there's a whole lot of instruction God gives to us to
Yes.
stand firm and to embrace and pick up and put on and put off." There, it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like He's asking us to do some things too,
Yes.
but He'll give you the strength to do whatever it is He
Correct.
asks you to do. So. And I do like that you do make I liked a statement that you made about fortresses, and you just made the statement, when we enter a fortress, it doesn't make us any stronger.
Yeah.
We're just as weak and frail as we were before, just that we're in a fortress now, and it's God's strength.
Mm-hmm.
But then we also, and it's His protection. But but we've got to get in the fortress. We've got to abide in Him,
Mm-hmm.
and so He does His part that only He can do. But there's a role for us as well, and so yeah, that was great. There's a lot of lots of I just felt very helpful things. Something else you said that early on that I thought was great as well. You said fear and doubt insult God's character by questioning His goodness and power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a great word. I know people that just are fearful, they're anxious, they're worry warts, and
Yeah.
they will shrug it off and just say, that's just the way that I am. But you actually say that's an insult to God's character for a Christian leader, to be fearful, anxious, whatever.
Yeah.
How would you, and we know that leaders, we're symbols. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we set the example, but, how would you unpack that as well, to say it's an insult to God's character to say you're a Christian leader, but you're fearful of the future or fearful of what's going on in culture or whatever else it might be?
Well, I think kind of coming back to that fortress illustration, if we were to be sitting in a fortress shaking and trembling, what does that communicate about the fortress? Well, it communicates that we think that the fortress is incapable, is not going to be able to withstand the attack. And so as leaders, our behavior is kind of puts on display for other people who God is, like what we're having faith in God to do. So if Moses at the Red Sea would have panicked and started trying to swim across the Red Sea, well, everyone would have panicked, because it would be like, well, if the leader thinks that God's not going to save us, we are done for.
Yeah.
So as leaders, we have an opportunity we're not just leading people to a destination. I think this was what really struck me so much as I was working on this, is we're not leading people just to get things done. We're leading people to a relationship. We're
Mm-hmm.
leading people to trust God. And that's really the essence of what we're called to do as leaders. It's not just getting things done. It's leading people to trust and believe God for who He is, and to worship Him as a great provider and a trustworthy God. And
Mm.
our behavior as leaders, our faith, our calm confidence, our grit, our resilience, all of that, our courage in the face of fear shows faith. It shows that, you know what? this is a huge problem. And yet I can have calm confidence because my God is bigger than the problem. We see throughout, especially through the Old Testament, you see all the different problems that God allowed to happen over and over and over again. He didn't remove the problems. God called Joshua, be strong and courageous. He could have stopped. He could have just snapped his fingers and had no problems entering the land. And yet he allowed them to face those challenges. And so, to the people you were talking about earlier that think that everything should just be easy, well, God didn't do that in the Old Testament. I don't think he's going to be doing that anytime soon. He allows challenges because it puts on display that he's greater. And leaders are kind of at the forefront of that. We get to be the ones putting that on display that, hey, God is bigger and you can trust him. And just as I'm trusting him, you can trust him as well.
And you make a statement about just one of the big challenges for leaders is controlling their own emotions.
It is.
And
I'm sure you've experienced that as well.
Yeah. And my dad used to say, if you're on a ship, sailing ship in a storm, if you see the captain at the helm, calm and in control, with his hand on the wheel, that calms. If you see him anxiously looking at the life raft and panicking and pacing, and popping pills, then you don't have confidence. And so, one of the roles I found when I was as a leader, facing things I'd never faced before, wasn't quite sure what to do. Pretty traumatic experience, difficult phone calls and conversations, but you've got to get control of that and say, I'm the leader. I like,
it's a great analogy.
You said lots of things. You said something, page 108, today's overwhelming challenge will probably be next year's fading memory. And that resonated with me as well. I've thought back on some crises where all day long I was in meetings and phone calls and working things out and talking to an attorney or whatever it was you had to do. And it was all consuming and you couldn't think of anything else. And then a couple of years later, you forget about it until it's like that all got resolved. That God worked that out. It was tedious at the time. But
it is hard.
Like all those crises, they got worked out and things went on from glory to glory. And so knowing that, because one of the things you say about grit is so much of it is about perspective when it comes to challenges and problems. If you see them as, why would a loving God let me face all these challenges? Your mind's going to get into some bad places. But true. If you realize, like you said, Joshua, all the great ones, you talk about challenges are just kind of the field in which leaders are made. And that's where he fine tunes you. You give the example of the biosphere, with the trees that grew very rapidly in this very artificial environment, but then they collapsed because they'd had no wind, they'd had no friction, no storms or anything to toughen them up. And I think sometimes it seems counterintuitive for us as Christians to think, why do we need to be tough? We just need to be loving and kind. But tough doesn't mean you're mean or cruel or a bully.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It just means you've got tough skin. If you're thin-skinned, I don't know how you can lead. You're going to have to get past that. And but you made a kind of interesting statement. I'd like you to unpack a little bit for me. You're talking about obviously leaders have to deal with that. That's what they're paid to do. That's their assignment. But you also said, page 113. That you recommend not necessarily shielding your spouse or your kids from all the crises as well. And I think we kind of know that if we're the leader, we can't delegate that. We got to face it head on. But I think sometimes our natural instinct is protect our family. And yet you suggest don't protect them too much. Why would you say that?
Well, kind of going back to that whole analogy of the gym, if we never go to the gym, if we never exercise, we're never going to get stronger. And what first kind of got me thinking about this, our president, Paul Davis, had mentioned this at one of our conferences, and he was challenging us to not protect your spouse completely from everything. There's some things that you don't need to drag them into the middle of. But if we protect them from everything and don't allow them the opportunity to be able to face those challenges, they're not going to progress along with us. And I've seen this in some leaders. And when he said this, I was like, oh man, I see that. I could like instantly picture a few individuals where they hadn't allowed their spouse to come along with them, and the husband had progressed as a leader, but their wife couldn't handle the challenges. And so there was this massive gap between them. And if we want our spouse to be able to progress and grow with us, we actually have to allow them to be able to go through those struggles and talk through them with us. And again, not all of them, but there does need to be a sharing of that. And the same with our kids. We've talked through, and we've moved multiple times with our family, and we've talked through tough stuff and gone through different challenges. And we've really tried to not shield them completely from everything, but to allow them to really, even just to talk through the challenges I'm facing. Be like, I don't have to give the details of the struggle, but hey, this is a challenge, and this is the hope and the joy that I'm finding in this. And so what it does is it allows them to learn the mindsets of how do you deal with challenges, because they're going to face challenges like all the time. Yeah. Our daughter just recently was going through some challenges and had messaged me and sent a picture of when we had moved from South Africa. This is over a decade ago, so she was like 13, I think. At the time, I'd given them this list of verses, of a little booklet of verses with comfort, confidence, and joy in them, of trusting in the sovereignty of God through those things. And she sent me a little picture of that and said, I still have it, still going back to it. But talking through those challenges allowed them at a young age to develop some of that grit through real life experience. And it sticks with them.
I know pastors that had a big debate about that, some that just shared everything, and whatever was going on, whatever messy thing that they encountered in their role, they'd come home and tell their spouse. And then others who said, no, when I walk out of the office, I don't want to take all that home. But it is true that dealing with a lot of those kind of adversity kind of things grows you, not even just as a leader, but in your faith and your walk with God, your trust, your maturity. And so I've seen some huge disconnects there where the leader over time, a decade, 20 years later, God had taken them into some really deep places, but you went home and their spouse was still back where they were 20 years ago. And they hadn't had the opportunity to be stretched and to grow. And so I think I suspect that's kind of, it all hinges a bit on the maturity level and relationship, how much you share. But
I think the relationship
as well
part is key there too, because there are some things that, and if I think maybe a follow up to that would be like, if you allow them to be in the process, they also need to be allowed to be part of the resolution to allow that, because otherwise they may still be holding on to some things and using wisdom. But when you really see it in something that's been stretched over 20 years, you really notice, wow, that's a big difference there. So,
I had just a kind of basic kind of problem. It was sort of a mystery. Something was going on, not even so much related to people, but just a problem I had to solve. And so I've got two 11-year-old twin grandsons. And so I just thought, hey guys, I'm going to give you a problem that I'm trying to solve right now. And what would you do? What would you think about that? And they really got intrigued by it and, began to kind of try to work it out, and they offered suggestions. And I just thought, why not let them start learning how to solve problems, and not to see me wringing my hands, but just to say, hey, you're going to have to solve problems, and this is how you do it. And it's not overwhelming. It's not terrible. There's usually a solution if you apply yourself to it and seek God. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I think sometimes I think we just get so busy and trying to deal with situation in the moment that we're not thinking, or it's a little so raw for us that we're kind of bringing home pretty toxic stuff, and it's not, you have to
You have to
sort of be
filter it
careful.
down a
But
bit for your kids.
yeah, so you have a whole section that I kind of wanted to lean into in particular because I think I'm going to guess you're much more adept at it than I am. But you had a whole section on just physically building strength and resilience and health.
Hmm.
And I just thought that you had some really very practical stuff in there that I thought was great. Some stuff I've got questions about, and so I'll ask you about that. But at page 154, he said, I view my body as one of the talents and gifts God has given me, and you're
Yeah.
steward of what. Obviously, some people are given stronger bodies, maybe
Sure.
more resilient bodies, but whatever it is we've been given, we're a steward of that. And I have found that uh, my physical condition has huge implications for my spiritual, emotional being as well. If I'm overweight, if I'm tired,
Yeah.
stressed, not caring for myself, eating poorly, well, then I deal with a spiritual problem. I deal with an emotional load, and I just don't handle it nearly as well. And so you walk through a number of things. I'm just going to throw some stuff out at you,
Sure.
popcorn wise. You can just kind of explain this to me. You talk about relaxing your jaw. That your jaw
Okay.
actually can be. I thought that was very interesting. I think I may have read that somewhere before, but I thought that was
Okay.
interesting. How 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 does your jaw help the rest of your body?
So yeah, that was an interesting one. I just learned this one from my physical therapist. I had my Achilles was ruptured, and I had a physical therapist, and he taught me that one.
Mm,
And yeah, but then doing some more research on it, just how your jaw is one of your biggest muscles in the body, or strongest muscles in the body.
mm,
Not the biggest, but if you can learn to relax that, it kind of has a cascading effect on the rest of your nervous system, just like letting you relax the rest of your body. And so if you can learn to just focus on relaxing that, it has a kind of a spillover effect into the rest of your
mm,
body. And
mm,
as I look back over the past, when you get stressed, what do? Or for me, I clench my jaw.
mm,
Um, and so learning to just check that, like, okay, is my jaw relaxed? Uh,
mm.
will help me to be able to evaluate how tense I am and be able to relax some. So that was a
Yeah,
simple
yeah.
but helpful little trick that someone taught me. So I thought I'd pass that on to others that way.
Yeah, well, I like that. And when you are dealing with those challenges, crises, you do get tense.
Yeah.
You were sharing having some back issues, and I went through that as well 2, 3 years
Uh-huh.
ago. A severely herniated disc in the lower disc of my
Wow.
back, and it was the and part of the healing that I went through was they just call it decompression, and but
Mm,
they just the chiropractor that worked on me just said, you're the, just living and certainly going through certain things compresses the body.
yeah.
And it could be running and pounding on, I think of some of the things I did when I was in my youth, and that probably did damage to my body back then. But just stretching it out, just learning to relax your body.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of the same way when I'm in stressful situations. My wife can just look at me and know that I'm carrying stress. Just physically, I give off all kinds of signs. And
Hmm.
to learn how, if you're going to have to handle stressful roles like a leader, learn to intentionally relax yourself and decompress. So yeah, you talk about your jaw. You talk about just intentionally smiling,
Hmm.
and it seems sort of counterintuitive. If you're stressed, you don't feel like smiling, and yet you suggest that just even the practice of smiling sends messages to the rest of your body.
Correct. Yeah. No, as you smile, it's yeah, even if you're not feeling it, by smiling, sometimes it allows your body to start feeling happier. It also, the other part that it does is if you can't clench your jaw and smile at the same time. So
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
a true smile. And so it's another one that's kind of connected to that. So as we
Mm.
do smile, it does that. It relaxes us. It sends endorphins throughout our body, and just allows us to your full body just to relax and remind us that, we may not need to take everything quite so seriously and trust that God's in control of it. It
Mm.
also kind of highlighting how, similarly to how your wife could notice when you're tense and things like that. The other people that we lead, same thing. And so one of
Yeah.
the other parts to leadership is that it's not just what we say, it's how we carry ourselves, that people are
Mhm.
watching that, like the ship captain you referred to. People are
Yeah.
watching us physically as well. And so our physical demeanor and how we carry ourselves as we go through challenges and problems are also communicating what's going on internally, because people
Yeah.
can see what's going on internally by how we're acting. And so as leaders, I think that's another reason why it is important to be aware of what we're communicating through our body
Yeah.
and
And I
taking
know if
care of
you're
it.
just walking down the hallway with a frown on your face all the time, it's going to send the wrong messages to all the staff and people
Yeah.
that are following you. Well, let me just kind of hit a couple more just quickly here. You talk a bit about what you eat, and
Hmm.
you describe them as inflammatory foods. And I can tell you when I've hunkered down in a stressful, busy, frenetic pace kind of schedule, going through lots of airports and TSA lines and other things, that's not when I tend to be eating all healthy food and carrot sticks and broccoli. You're grabbing what is convenient and quick, or what's
Mm,
offered, what's sitting out on the little tray of the meeting you're at. So any just advice on eating the kind of food that you eat, or the kind of eating habits that are going to help give you some resilience when you're having to go through challenging times?
yeah. Maybe a few different parts to that. One would be just in our normal eating habits, if we can have a good, healthy diet that is low in inflammatory foods, like keeping low in our like wheat and sugars and things like that cause a lot of inflammation in our body. If we can keep it low most of the time, our body's able to handle some of those more stressful times when they do come. It can handle a bad meal. It can handle a few bad meals here and there. But if it's already kind of struggling, then those are just going to push it over the top. And so
Yeah.
that's the
So your
first
body
part.
can handle a couple of double
It
cheeseburgers
can,
or
yeah.
something.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
were during COVID, we got locked in the Amsterdam airport for 24 hours, and I lived off
Oh.
of cheeseburgers at McDonald's. Um, and so that would be the first part, would be this getting a good healthy base. And then two other parts of that. One, during travel, that's been so helpful for me, learning how to fast
Hmm.
has removed an incredible amount of stress from me, that I know that if something is the only option there that's not going to make me feel good, I know I can go a couple of days and I can be just fine. It's not going to
Hmm.
kill me. And that has
Hmm.
reduced the pressure and stress of finding food while traveling tremendously for
Yeah.
myself.
Well, you also talk about intermittent fasting, especially in the mornings, and I've done
Yeah.
some of that.
Okay.
I've kind of been on and off the wagon on that, especially if I'm traveling.
Yeah.
But ideally, when I'm really doing well, after I have dinner the night before, I've tried to go even as far as just lunch before
Hmm.
having a real meal. And
Yeah.
you recommend that. I think you say, especially for men, maybe it's even more helpful than maybe for some women, but.
Correct.
Why is that helpful?
So what that does is it gives your body about 16 hours to rest and digest. And so during that time is when your body rejuvenates, gets rid of all the old bad cells, and so that allows it to really just to heal, and giving it that stretch of time is so important for it.
Yeah.
And so that, for me, that works really, really well. I do similarly. I try to quit after dinner, maybe a small stack earlier on, but then wait till lunch or mid-afternoon. If I'm trying to cut weight once or twice a week, I'll just go from what they call OMAD, which is 1 meal a day, go from dinner to dinner. That's a really simple way to cut some weight off. Do that once or twice a week, and over a few months, you can pull back some pounds that way and kind of get things back under control after the holidays or things like that.
Yeah. That's, yeah.
Or travels or whatever. It's hard. I know it's a challenge with travels, and missionaries and pastors.
I find
they face
when you're facing adversity, it's like you can't handle a fight on a lot of fronts at once, so it's kind of like, I got this personnel issue that's really stressful right now, so I'm not going to battle skipping meals, or I'm going to go ahead and eat dessert every night this week because I just feel sorry for myself. And so it's hard when when you've got to have grit in some really pressing things to say, okay, well, I'll back off over here, but it actually can work against you. And so a couple of things, just real quick to say, you got a couple of things I found interesting. One is you talk about having a cold shower, at least ending your shower with cold water, and that sounded a little strange to me, but I think there's some science behind that.
It did to me a few years ago.
I've only had cold showers when the hot water went out. But so explain that to me, why that would be good.
So this was something that I had never done before. I read a few years ago. I read some books on Wim Hof, a guy from the Netherlands, and he teaches a lot about this. But what was really struck me in this was, so in our muscular system, when you exercise, the only way you grow strength physically and for muscles and endurance that way is you have to exercise it. But on our nervous system, the way that we exercise that is by going through dramatic temperature changes. In our modern day society, we don't do that very much. And I realized as I was reading through them, like, oh my word, I never exercise my nervous system like it's made to do, like it's able to do. By doing that, we increase the strength of our nervous system so that it's able to be able to handle those things. And so ending your shower with a cold shower, or doing it right in the middle of the shower, if you want to do it that way, just so that it gets a big shock to the system. And what that does is it strengthens that nervous system so it has capacity to go through bigger changes. And no, this may not work for everyone, but like my allergies went away, and I wasn't expecting that at all. It just allowed it to get my nervous system to get stronger and to be able to handle things differently. And I encourage people to do it. Start off. You don't have to start off by doing an ice dunk,
like a polar bear,
but just going a little bit colder than you were. Just like you do it. It's the same thing as with weights. You don't want to go in there and start off bench pressing, 200 pounds. You want to go in there and start with where you're at and do a little bit more each week. Otherwise, you're going to be just crippled. Yeah. Same thing is true with the cold shower. It's a stress to the system. So just keep pushing it a little bit more. And what's really interesting is that it builds mental toughness and resilience to be able to handle that. And so it grows your grit just by doing that physically aspect.
Yeah,
of it.
I do find just the fact you can sort of make yourself do some things that you wouldn't normally enjoy, you're not drawn to, but it does create some toughness, because there are times as a leader you have to do stuff you don't want to, you don't enjoy. But
yes, you do.
So one other one there too is just about naps. You talk about maybe a mid-afternoon nap, and I think you said somewhere between 6 or 8 minutes to 22 minutes is like your optimum time. I know a lot of people immediately feel sort of guilty for doing that. You're supposed to work all day, but like a lot of us, like for myself, when I'm not on the road, I work from home and I've got a nice comfortable chair. And there's been a few times where, I don't know, I start early, I could be at my desk at 5:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock. So by 9 o'clock, I've already put in almost 4 hours of work. And
Yeah.
so by 1:30, if I'm feeling kind of, you know what that's like. You're forcing yourself to sit at your desk, but you can just tell you're not very productive at that point.
Yeah.
You're spinning your wheels. Your mind's a little foggy. Um, so what's the benefit of mid-afternoon power nap?
I think someone had said once just that our main focus needs to be managing your energy, not your time. And I think
Yeah.
that was a really helpful just principle to apply to that. That is it more important that we put in every amount of time versus what are you actually offering there with your energy? And so just understanding that we do get run down and I don't need to, I don't do a nap, have a nap every day. But there are some days and some tasks that are more draining than others. And those
Mm.
are the days that you're like, you know what? I really need to just take a step back and take a few minutes and refresh. A lot of times it's when it's in the middle of travels or difficult meetings, just to take a minute, take a few minutes to just to refresh. And then it allows you to step into that situation with full energy.
Yeah.
Because if you come into it just exhausted, you're not giving your full self to that. And that's not what people need from you.
Mm.
And so I think that idea of managing your energy over your time was very freeing to be able to think through that and evaluate just, okay, what's going to be the most beneficial here for this to
Yeah.
help serve people.
Yeah. I I think especially in harder, challenging times when you really need to be at your best,
Hmm.
if physically you're worn down, when I'm tired, tend to be way more emotional,
Yeah.
uh, more negative than I would be normally. And there's times I hear myself thinking, and I just think to myself, I gotta just I need to stop for now because my mind is not going anywhere good right now. And I realize if I sleep on it, I know I'll be in a much better place in the morning.
Yeah.
If I just get rested up, just hang out with a friend and laugh a little bit or something.
Hmm.
And so just the being aware of physically, emotionally, spiritually, of a certain toughness. Again, toughness doesn't just mean like you're going to get into a wrestling ring or something, but it just means all your systems are working at optimal levels, the way they're
Yeah.
designed to, so that your body can handle a lot if you're taking care of your body
You
and
can
along with your
tremendously.
emotions and other things. And maybe just one last, I liked page 214. You said courage is faith in action,
Mm.
and I found again, it's not something I was really taught in school and seminary. I wasn't really taught that leaders needed courage, but then I had to fire a top performer in my organization. I had to confront a prominent executive for some stuff that seemed a little unethical. And there's just moments where it'd be a lot easier to just stay quiet and not do
Yeah.
anything. There's times I've just sat there, staring at my phone and having to pray and say, God, help me, because the last thing in the world I want to do is make this phone call. But I'm the leader and I'm the one who's supposed to make these calls, so I'm going to do it. But it takes courage,
It
uh,
does.
and I think secular leaders can have courage too, but they can find their courage in other places. I think for a
Hmm.
Christian, we get our courage from our walk with God
Yeah.
and the strength He gives us and the peace He gives us. And so I like that. Just we can say we have faith. I hear people talk about having faith, but faith often is expressed in courage.
Mm.
If you
Yeah.
really trust God, then you'll have the courage to do the hard thing.
Yeah.
Um, And so, yeah, lots of great statements here, Kyle. And I appreciate just the insight, wisdom. You've obviously read widely. There's lots of great quotes in here from various people as well.
Quoted you a
And
few
just
times in there. Appreciated those
yeah, so I noticed
quotes.
that. I noticed that. That was I made sure to make note of that. And
They were helpful.
And that's the kind of book that leadership books that I enjoy are just ones that are pulling from your own journey, obviously, and experience, but also part of your journey is just what you've learned along the way. And
Yeah.
so I always love learning from what other folks have learned as well, doing similar kind of work. And so I really recommend folks to get this book. It'll be coming out in March, and we'll be sure to have all the information in the show notes so you know how to get a copy and follow along with what Kyle does. In his book, he lists some various resources he's put together that are helpful as well. And so we'll try to help steer you toward him and just the wisdom he has. And so Kyle, been great. Any last word that you would just share as far as if someone just maybe listening to this podcast says, I'm kind of sensing maybe I need a bit more grit in my leadership right now, where do you start? If you just, maybe you've been just kind of getting beat up by the roles that you have right now, and you're taking it on the chin, and you need to have a bit more grit, or maybe you're just thinking all you can think about is quitting, finding an easier job, and you just feel like that's not necessarily honoring to God. Where would you encourage them to start building more grit into their leadership?
Well, I think, this it has about 20 some different perspectives in the book, but just those perspectives on keeping God central, keeping God at the focus of everything that we do, where it talks about in Psalm, it says, I've set the Lord always before me. Because he's at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Yeah. And just that idea of being unshakable. Why? Because he's at our right hand. And there's another place in Psalm 112 where it talks about not being afraid of bad news. Because he who trusts in the Lord, he won't be afraid of bad news. And I realized that for me, that one really hit me. It was like, a lot of times, like, does my heart rate go up when I get bad news or something that's troubling or difficult? And that's really that litmus test of, okay, am I trusting the Lord? Because if I am, well, then I'll be able to handle those difficulties with calm courage. And so just learning to just keep our eyes on the Lord in the midst of those challenges and make sure that he's the focus, not the problem, not the challenge, that we're looking at God first and seeing the problems behind God through that lens of him, not the problem first.
Yeah.
And that really can by changing our perspective on how we look at those problems, really, it doesn't change the problem, but it changes us. And that has been just so impactful for my own life in leadership, realizing if I don't learn how to deal with the challenges, I'm not going to survive leadership. But as we learn how to deal with the challenges and walk with God through those, it helps us to lead others towards God, but it also helps us survive as leaders the challenges that are going to come. And it allows us to walk through those with God.
Well, we just always encourage folks, if God has assigned you to a task, he is fully prepared to equip you and support you and strengthen you to be successful. He doesn't set you up to fail. He sets you up to accomplish the purpose he has for you. So if you're in a hard place, be encouraged. If God puts you in that hard place, he's got all the resources necessary for you to accomplish what he intends for you in that place. So let God give you that holy grit that you might need to see yourself through to the end. But it is possible. Don't give up. There's ways to strengthen your leadership if you'll let God work in your life and perhaps change some of your perspectives. And so you get your eyes on him, not on the problems and the challenges. So, Kyle, thank you for giving us your time. And
my pleasure.
I look forward. We hope to hear of lots of great stories and reports from people that are encouraged by your book in the days to come.
That's what we're praying that way. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Well, that's all for this show, and we want to thank you again for spending your valuable time with us today.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider taking just a moment and giving us a great review. Your review will help people find the podcast and allow these resources to encourage more people. If you took something valuable away from this episode, please share it with someone who would enjoy it.
If you'd like to find the show notes, blog posts, and free resources for ministry and leadership, as well as some information on my book, Overflowing, visit kylefarran.com. That's KYLEFARRAN.com. Hope to see you soon on a future podcast.